Hey, you guys. Welcome back to the salon. And welcome to what will hopefully be the first in a long series. The idea for this came to me in a flash of inspiration not too long ago. I don't even know where the idea for it came from, but I was immediately like, hey, that sounds like a cool idea. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through lists of all the horror films that came out every year since I was born and pick out my five favorite ones from each year in no particular order, that's an easy enough concept, right? Everybody on the same page? Good. Okay, off we go into the foggy mists of the year of my birth, 1972, because I'm old. So, despite the somewhat cheesy, but also absolutely perfect title, William Crane's blaxploitation classic, Blacula, actually takes its source material very seriously. And the tone of it, I think, is like helped immensely by William Marshall in the title role, who brings it this kind of like elegant gravitas. He's absolutely not making fun of the role, he's absolutely just being completely and totally serious. So, what we have in this movie, Blacula, whose real name is actually like Prince Mamuwalde, he heads for a meeting with Count Dracula back in the late 18th century. He's actually looking for the Count to help him out in suppressing the slave trade. But at this meeting, Dracula pulls not one, but a series of dick moves. Firstly, he hits on Mamuwalde's wife, Luva, like right at the table in front of everybody, which is like a big fucking party foul, right? Then, when Mamuwalde understandably protests this, Drac bites him, and then, which, obviously passes on the vampire curse. And as if all that wasn't bad enough, he also gives Mamuwalde the kind of insulting name Blacula, right? Seals him in a coffin, locks his wife in the crypt with him so he can, essentially, witness her slowly dying. In case you weren't aware, Count Dracula, kind of a dick, kind of a douche. So we then jump ahead to the then present day of 1972, where two gay stereotypes, who also happen to be interior decorators, which is also kind of a gay stereotype, purchase the coffin at an estate sale and open it up, getting themselves subsequently desanguinated and releasing Blacula into the streets of Los Angeles in 1972. So from there, Blacula's sort of like badass fashion sense. He has this velvety, smooth voice, these very like old school, impeccable manners. They kind of like end up endearing him to a local group of friends, one of whom is a woman named Tina, who Blacula believes is his beloved wife, Luva, reincarnated. So Blacula like starts seducing Tina while at the same time snacking on other people in her inner circle, making the whole situation slightly awkward for everyone involved, to say the least. I love everything about this movie. Blacula is just such a great character. He's a monster, but he's still really sympathetic. And William Marshall, the actor, who was also in some early Star Trek episodes, very famous one, he has such screen presence that every time he's on screen, which is most of this movie, he's just like mesmerizing. Like you can't like look away from him. It's just like a really good looking, well-made movie overall. It has like a great score. It has like a gorgeous 70s fashion, hot chicks, hot dudes, and a really entertaining story that really like keeps you interested. There was actually a sequel to the following year called Scream, Blacula, Scream, which is also outstanding and has like a little bit more of a voodoo kind of flavor to it. Though I will say that other unrelated blaxploitation horror titles that sort of like followed after the success of this, like Blackenstein, were of decidedly lower quality, let's call it that. Apparently, though, the guy that made Blackenstein also directed a movie called Black the Ripper, which never got released for whatever reason. And not gonna lie, I really kind of want to see that. Now, as far as I know, in late 2021, I think ideas were kind of being batted around for a Blacula reboot / remake, something like that. So we'll see how that goes. I'm not averse to it, but I don't really know how it would work out with another actor playing that character because I so associated with William Marshall. But, I'd be willing to give it a shot. Okay, so come on. You knew I was going to pick this. How can you not pick this one? This is a classic. Now, I will say that it's probably closer to being a thriller or a drama, I guess, than a straight horror film. I'm gonna say the subject matter of it hews close enough to survival horror that I'll allow it. And, Wikipedia has it categorized under list of horror films from 1972, so, I'm not gonna quibble with that. So, I feel like John Borman's film Deliverance has so kind of seeped into the public consciousness that even people who have never seen it have still kind of seen it, if you know what I'm talking about. Because it's been parodied so many times and shit like that. I mean, for example, if you say to somebody, keep paddling, I hear banjos, everybody instantly knows what you mean. They don't say that in this movie exactly, but everybody knows that it's referring to this. Likewise, if somebody tells you, well, hopefully not you specifically, to squeal like a pig, you're going to be in for a bad time. So there's that too. But for those of you that may have just crawled out of a 1950s fallout shelter maybe, or warped in from some alternate dimension, Deliverance is a movie that is based on the 1970 novel by James Dickey, in which four friends from the big city of Atlanta, Georgia, take a canoeing vacation out in the wilderness to do some much-needed male bonding. So, aside from having to deal with just your standard run-of-the-mill survival challenges out in the wild, as anyone would, the gang also end up falling afoul of a group of these backwoods hillbillies who end up brutally raping one of the men, played by Ned Beatty. So from that point, the movie then turns into a savage revenge flick, as the friends kind of try to track down and kill the hicks that did this to their friend, and the whole time also having to contend with nature being a general pain in the ass who is essentially indifferent to their suffering, you know what I mean? Trying to go to these white waters and smash into rocks and shit like that. So you have all of that stuff going on, all the while these rapey hillbillies are following them as well. So, I mean, this thing is just gorgeously shot. It's amazingly acted. Burt Reynolds is great in this. I think he'd been in movies before this, but I think this was kind of his star-making role. And it's actually still pretty grueling to watch. I remember seeing this when I was probably younger than I should have been to be watching this, and the scene with Ned Beatty squealing like a pig, I was just kind of no, oh no, it's just terrible to watch. I have a hard time watching rape scenes anyway, but you know what I mean? So it's just like that. I mean, it's just a deserved classic and should be on any list of best 70s movies. It was actually nominated for 3 Oscars and 5 Golden Globes, so there's that too. So if you haven't seen it, I mean, come on, you really need to see it. So here's another gritty rape revenge film, which was released in 1972, The Last House on the Left. Now, this was the directorial debut of horror legend Wes Craven, and I'm gonna say, despite this movie being 50 years old, which, holy crap, that blows my mind, the movie is still pretty shocking, and it definitely does make you feel like you need a Silkwood shower, after watching it. It's just so scuzzy. It's just so scuzzy, this movie. It's just something about it. So the story is basically an exploitation horror take on Ingmar Bergman's 1960 film The Virgin Spring, which was also kind of a rape revenge story. But this one is following kind of a pair of young hippie girls. I think they're 17 or thereabouts. Their names are Mary Collingwood and Phyllis Stone. And they're going to a concert in the city. And they end up making the unfortunate decision to follow a guy named Junior back to his place to buy some weed, as one did in 1972. And surprise, surprise, there's a gang of lowlifes at the apartment who I think are sort of loosely inspired by the Manson family, because one of them's a woman named Sadie, and it's just kind of the rest of them are just scuzzy dudes. And I think one's a father and son pair. And they proceed to gang rape one of the girls, Phyllis, and then they tie them both up, throw them in the trunk of their car, and take them out into the middle of the woods, and then basically rape, torture, and kill them. They make one of the girls pee herself. It's a lot. It's awful, and it's all shown in pretty squirm-inducing detail. I mean, one guy carves his name into the girl's chest. It's a lot. Now, that's not the end of the story, though. After the girls get killed, the lowlifes end up, coincidentally, at the home of Mary's parents, the Collingwoods, who are actually getting ready for Mary's 17th birthday party. They have no idea yet that she's dead, right? So the lowlife gang like pretend to be traveling salesmen whose car broke down, and the Collingwoods very hospitably like open their home to them, giving them food, they give them a place to stay overnight, they try to help them out. But during the course of the evening, they overhear the gang talking about what they did to the girls. And after that point, the parents sort of like click right into brutal vengeance mode, using knives, electrocution, chainsaws, and penis chomping to dispatch all of the dirtbags in their house. So it's very much, like I said, it's very much one of those rape revenge, to defeat the monster, beware you don't become the monster type of stories. It's very much like that. Now, I will say that like the cheap kind of look of this one really sort of contributes to its illicit vibe, I guess. You absolutely feel like this is something you probably should not be watching. Now, I will say that there's some very weird sort of like slapstick style comedy in the movie in places that probably didn't need to be in there, because it's very like, it's like tonal whiplash a little bit. You're seeing like all this really grueling like rape and torture and shit like that, and then there's these cops who loop doo doo doo, you know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. It's very, very strange. But despite that, this one is actually still like really, really effective, really, really harrowing. And like I said, I think in a large part that's just because it has this completely scuzzy snuff film energy to it. It's like this whole atmosphere that's just like dirty and grimy and shit. And I will say too that one of the main things contributing to that, other than just the whole look of it in general, is the absolutely like skin crawling performance of David Hess as the gang leader Krug. I feel like David Hess always played these types of characters. I guess he looks like that type of dude. I'm sure he's a nice dude in real life. I don't know. But he always ended up playing like scuzbags like this. He's just so good at it. And it scares me how good it is, how good he is at it. And I don't know if that's because that's what he's like in real life or anything like that. I hope not. But yeah, but I think that's like a large part of what makes this, so difficult to watch, is just like what a dirtbag he is in particular. So Thomas Tryon's novel The Other is one that I always kind of bring up when somebody asks me to recommend great horror novels from the 1970s. Incidentally, another great one of his, which I've talked about on this channel before, is Harvest Home, which I also recommend, because I don't recommend the movie, but the book is actually really great. As far as The Other is concerned, though, although Thomas Tryon himself wrote the screenplay for the 1972 movie adaptation, reportedly wasn't really all that happy with the final result, like how the movie came out. I have to say, though, I really don't have any idea, like, what his issue was with it, because, I mean, the movie is fucking great. It's easily one of my favorite movies of the 1970s. So, the story behind it, it's set in rural Connecticut in 1935. It's kind of like out on a farm. So, the story centers around twin boys named Holland and Niles, and they live on this farm with their widowed mom and their aunt and uncle, and a couple other people that kind of, like, live on this big, like, stretch of land or whatever that are kind of like related. Also living along with them is the boys' Russian grandmother, Ada, and she's actually played by Uta Hagen, who is like this legendary actor. She also like I think she even like wrote a book about like acting method and stuff, and like taught acting for many years as well. So in the movie, the grandmother has taught the boys essentially how to like astral project. What they can do is they can sort of like place their consciousness inside another person, or even inside animals like a bird or something like that, so they can experience life through different eyes. So they've been doing this for a really long time with their grandmother, as sort of like a bonding thing, and they just call it like the game. It's supposed to be just like this fun thing. Hey, I'm gonna go into a bird today, or I'm gonna go into the dog or something like that, and like see what the world is like from their point of view. So it all seems like kind of a lark until this ostensibly harmless game leads to some pretty devastating consequences, which I don't necessarily want to spoil. Now, as the story goes on, there's a pretty big twist, and I don't really want to spoil that either. Despite how old this movie is, I feel like it's a little bit underseen and maybe a little bit underappreciated, and I think it's best gone into not really knowing what the twist is, because it's like a big... I mean, the first time I saw this movie, because I saw the movie before I read the book, because I saw this movie when I was a kid. I was probably only like 10 or something, maybe not even that old. And the first time, like when I saw the twist, I was like, holy shit. Like maybe you'll be able to guess nowadays because it's been done a lot since then. But when I saw this as a kid, it was like this big, huge fucking no way. It was kind of like that. And another thing too is that even though the entire thing pretty much takes place in this sort of like warm, like pastoral sunlight, it's almost all like set in the daytime, and it's all these really warm colors, like big wheat fields, and it's all very beautiful and idyllic and everything like that. It sort of has this whole like Norman Rockwell nostalgia kind of like filter over it. It's sort of like that. But despite that, there's still something really like eerie about like the whole tone of it. It's almost kind of like there's just this sense of like subtle menace like going on all the time, which I think a large part came from the book, because the book is kind of like that too, as is Harvest Home. He's just really good at something that seems really like safe and idyllic and everything like that on the surface, but he's very good at conveying this sense of menace, and you're not really sure where it's coming from. And so this movie has that as well. One scene in particular, which if you've seen the movie, you probably know which one I'm talking about. It involves a rain barrel. Actually haunted my dreams for many years after I saw this. Because like I said, I was pretty young when I saw this movie. Like I said, I was probably maybe 10. I don't even think I was that old. I might have been more like 8 or 9, because this was like on cable all the time. Incidentally, The Other was actually only the third film appearance by John Ritter, the beloved comic actor, who became very well known in the late 1970s as Jack Tripper on Three's Company, and would go on to be in many other things. He died quite young, sadly, but yeah, this was only his third film appearance, so he's very, very young in this. So the fifth of my 5 favorite movies of 1972, the Brian De Palma film that doesn't get brought up nearly as often as it should. The very, very weird and very creepy Sisters. Now, this also focuses on a set of twins, just like The Other. That's a complete coincidence. The twins in this case being played by Margot Kidder in actually what I think is one of her best roles. She actually has a French accent in this, so if you ever wanted to see Margot Kidder with a French accent, here you go. Now, De Palma very loosely based the screenplay on a pair of real-life conjoined twins from the Soviet Union that he had read about in a Life magazine article back in 1966. So the story deals with this French-Canadian model named Danielle, and she apparently has a murderous twin sister named Dominique. So this is kind of like a good evil twin kind of narrative. Dominique will apparently kill anyone who has any kind of sexual interest in Danielle. Dominique apparently doesn't want anyone coming between her and her sister, you see, either literally or figuratively coming in between. Now, after Danielle, near the very beginning of the movie, brings home a guy named Philip after a date, and he is brutally stabbed to death by Dominique, a suspicious neighbor named Grace, who also happens to be a newspaper reporter. She kind of sees some sketchy shit, like, through the window. Like, she sees the victim and sees... She doesn't exactly see the stabbing, but she kind of sees him. He writes help in blood, like, on the window, and she sees it. She's kind of... So this reporter is kind of, like, works for this rinky-dink little paper, and she's kind of, like, looking for her big break. This is set in New York City, by the way. I think, like, where they live is it Long Island? I think it might be Long Island. So she reports it to police, but by the time the cops get there to Danielle's apartment, all the evidence has been scrubbed away, and the body has been expertly hidden in a good place. I mean, just like when I saw that, I was like, ooh, I never would have thought of that. But yeah, just gonna write that down. You know what I mean? Just in case you ever need that information. It so happened that Danielle has this ex-husband who's kind of like always like lurking around and looks a little bit like John Waters. He kind of like came up and like helped her out, like helped her apparently cover up this murder. Now from there, the reporter, who is absolutely certain that she saw like a murder take place and that some kind of shenanigans are going on, she ends up hiring a private detective who's actually played by Charles Durning, and the pair of them like try to Scooby-Doo their way to the bottom of the murder. They're pretty much convinced that Danielle is protecting her sister, like after they find out like what's going on. So the movie gets considerably weirder like as it goes on. There's a plot involving like a mental hospital, and there's like some really bizarre dream sequences. One particularly nightmarish scene toward the end that might give you like some weird like psychosexual like heebie-jeebies. There's something just like really unsettling about some of the scenes in this like toward the end. Also, much like The Other, this one also has something of a twist that I don't really want to spoil, though I will say in my opinion the twist is more obvious in this film than it was in The Other. I don't think that knowing the twist diminishes the enjoyment of the movie, at least in my opinion. But you know, your mileage may vary. But again, I don't really want to spoil it because that's what it is. Like I said, people will probably guess it easier just because this movie's from 1972, and a lot of movies have done this particular twist, you know, subsequently. So it's not as easy to like pull one over on the audience, I guess, as it used to be because people hadn't seen it as much. So this movie was like shot in that sort of like off-kilter, like very Hitchcockian style that Brian De Palma is known for. It kind of has a thread of black humor, which I think is like actually really effective. And it has like a couple of really cool and very, very attention-inducing uses of his tried and true like split screen effects, especially the one with the cops coming up the steps while Danielle and their husband are like cleaning the apartment, like after the body, you know, trying to get rid of the body or whatever. And it's like, it's really good because it's kind of like split screen and you can see what's going on. It's like, it's really, really good. But they do it a couple times, you know, and it's like really effective. And, you know, I'm just going to say this is a really underrated gem. And I feel like it doesn't really get talked about a lot. I think it has a Criterion Collection release, but it seems like when people talk about Brian De Palma, this isn't one that usually gets brought up first, and I actually really, really like this one a lot, and I feel like it needs more love. So thank you for watching this particular installment, so stay tuned for the next one, on which I'll be picking my top 5 favorite horror movies from 1973, and I think I can already think which 5 they're going to be. 1973 was a great year for horror movies, and I'm probably going to have a hard time narrowing it down to 5, but we'll see. I'm not sure when that video is going to go up, but I am absolutely going to make another one. So again, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.